Warning, this guide features Week 1 strats. Better strats can and will be discovered if they haven't already, so be mindful. Hi guys, and welcome to a Hector Lecture Guide to the fight M10S. These are the Xtremes. For this fight you're going to need standard light parties. Group 1 left, Group 2 right. Group 1 will stick to the blue boss, while Group 2 sticks to the red boss. You'll also need spreads. These are wall relative. Group 1 left, Group 2 right, and can be a little bit freestyle at times. You'll need clock spots. These are boss relative to the blue boss. And you also need fan spreads. These have tanks and melees nearer to the boss, and healers in range a little bit further away, with supports in the middle, DPS on the outside. The fight begins with you just fighting Red Hot. Red Hot will cast Hot Impact, which is a double tank buster. Have your tanks share this together with cooldowns. Red Hot will now jump to one random wall, and start to cast Flame Floater, and start to tether players one at a time, 4 players in total. You can tell which one you are based off of the debuff you get. These tethers need to be stretched out, and we're going to show the Party Finder strat for how we do this while mostly keeping uptime. Have your first player marked, grab the tether, and take it counterclockwise from the boss. This is going to create a fire puddle as they get dashed to, and give them a fire vuln up. They just need to walk out of the fire puddle quickly. The next player should continue this counterclockwise rotation, but only go a little bit past halfway. The third player is going to go back into the corner, and the fourth player is going to rotate back near to where the boss started. This creates a sort of L shape, making one corner unsafe, but leaving most of the rest of the arena safe. Immediately after this finishes, start to drag the boss out into the corner that you've just made unsafe, and position ready for Alley-Oop Inferno. These are going to be spreads, but also puddles that will drop on every single player. Tanks and melees go near the boss, healers in range just hug near to the unsafe firewall that we've made. It doesn't really matter where. Drop your fire puddles, and immediately pull the boss out of the fire. You just need a space behind them, ready for cutback blaze. This is going to bait a huge 330-degree cleave that makes most of the arena unsafe with fire, and it's baited on the furthest player from the boss. To bait this correctly, we're all just going to stack directly behind the boss in the unsafe corner where we've been making all the fire. And you'll see this makes a giant cleave, but leaves us a big space available for us to do the final mechanic here, which is Pyrotation, a multi-hit stack. It'll hit 3 times, leaving a fire puddle with every hit. So we start close to the boss, and slowly walk back with each hit. There should be plenty of room to drop all 3, and then room to stand to avoid getting a dot from standing in the fire too long. The boss will cast Diver's Dare, which does raid-wide damage, and also cleanses the arena. The boss will jump to north, and swap out for Deep Blue. For Deep Blue phase, we start off with 6 Swell, which will just spawn a wave over on one random wall in the arena. Sickest Takeoff is going to be the boss going to go join that wave, but is also telegraphing either spreads or light party stacks. If you see 8 orbs on the boss, we're spreading. 2 big orbs, it's light parties. For light parties, it's just Group 1 left, Group 2 right, so I'll show spreads instead, because they're slightly more complicated. The boss will jump away, and we'll position in our spreads, but the boss will always make one lane unsafe. This leaves 2 other lanes safe, so the Group 1 will go in the left lane, and Group 2 will go in the right lane. Prepare for a knockback. You can either immune it or just ride it for this first one, and you have a few seconds afterwards to remain spread. Immediately go near the boss, and prepare for an alley-oop mechanic. You're going to get either alley-oop double dip, which does cleaves on every player or protean waves, and you need to dodge afterwards as the cleaves will repeat, or reverse alley-oop, where you need to stay still afterwards as the sides of the cleaves will instead be unsafe. Here's alley-oop double dip. We go into our boss relative protean wave positions, and afterwards we dodge by rotating into the gaps. Had it been reverse alley-oop, we go into our boss relative clock spots, and then we stand still, and the cleaves will go around us. Whichever alley-oop you get, next up is Deep Impact. This is a tank buster on the furthest player. It comes with a small knockback, so either pop knockback immunity or position so you can ride the knockback. This does cleave, so don't have anyone else too near, and make sure everybody else is tucked inside of the boss's hitbox so they don't accidentally bait it. You get another Diver's Dare raid-wide, and they fight together. Extreme Spectacular is an ultimate raid-wide attack. After they jump away, Immediately rush towards either the north or south wall to avoid this, preferably all together at north. And as they clash, you get raid-wide proximity damage, followed by several repeating raid-wide attacks, all while the bosses are untargetable. Big damage, and then we start the real fight. You're now going to be fighting both of the bosses at the same time for the rest of the fight. One thing to explain first, for the rest of the fight, you're going to get a lot of fire and water attacks at the same time. If a fire puddle ever gets clipped by a water attack, an orb spawns on it that will explode in an AoE shortly afterwards. If instead, fire and water line AoEs hit each other, you'll get an orb at the intersection that will explode. Some other fire and water attacks will simply do raid-wide damage when they hit each other, but I'll specify those ones. Immediately when you start, your bosses are probably quite different in health, but you don't actually have to worry about this for the whole fight. That's because at several points in time, the bosses will high-five each other and even out their health. So just make sure you're doing damage to one of them, or both of them by cleaving if you can. It all helps. To help with the cleaving, where possible, try to keep the bosses stacked on top of each other to maximize the amount of cleave damage that players can get on them. Next up, we get Insane Air. Deep Blue is always going to jump towards the 1 marker, and Red Hot is always going to jump towards the 3 marker. We're going to have Group 1 go towards Blue, and Group 2 go towards Red. Insane Air works pretty similar to in normal mode, with one major twist. Now, there are 3 different mechanics that you can get. If the surfboard on the marker that the boss is going towards is pointing down, that's a spread AoE, 4 cleaves on the 4 nearest players. If the surfboard is pointing straight out, that's a stack. In general, I recommend trying to point these away from the arena, and if you're confused about where to stack, stack on the healer. Finally, if the surfboard is pointing up, that's a tank buster. It's a point-blank AoE on the nearest player. The tank needs to take that with cooldowns, as it hurts. Here we can see that the water players are about to get a tank buster, and the fire players are about to get a stack. The tank in the north takes the tank buster with cooldowns directly on it. You can max melee this if the tank is positioned perfectly, but it's better to be a little bit further out. And the fire players in the south you can see are positioned ready for a stack. They're pointing this away from the arena to minimize how much of the arena is covered in fire. And we get another one. The fire players now have a tank buster, and the water players have spreads. We use our fan spreads that I show at the beginning of the fight, and we point them all away. Now fire players have a spread, and water players have a stack. Tanks and melees can greed their uptime, just as long as they get in position before this boss stops moving. And one more, there's always 4 sets. You will always get at least 1 tank buster, 1 stack, 1 spread. You will never get more than 1 tank buster, and the mechanics never repeat back to back. After you've done all 4 waves, drag the bosses together, ready for a Diver's Dare raid wide. If they're stacked close enough, Reprisal can mitigate both of these. Now the bosses will jump middle. They'll high-five to share their health back to even them out. The next mechanic is water snaking and fire snaking. This is heavy raid-wide damage, but also a proximity-baited debuff. By that I mean, if all of Group 1 are nearest to Deep Blue by being on the outside of them, and all of Group 2 are nearest to Red Hot, all of Group 1 will get the same debuff, and all of Group 2 will get the same debuff. However, which debuff you get is random. These red and blue debuffs do not prevent you from attacking either boss. You can still do damage to both of them. Instead, the red debuff means that you'll be targeted exclusively by Red Hot's mechanics, and the blue debuff means you'll only be targeted by Deep Blue's mechanics. You cannot bait any mechanics from the opposite boss of your debuff. Because it's random which debuff you get, sometimes your entire light party may have to swap, like in this case we see here. As a result, there are 2 completely different set of mechanics that you can get, and it's 50-50 which one you'll get on any given pull. I'm going to break these down one at a time, focusing on the blue debuff first. The strat I'm going to be showing is what's called Nomnom, and is commonly seen in Party Finder. For Nomnom strat, blue debuff players are going to try to stay entirely to the west side of the arena for their mechanics. The blue boss starts by jumping over towards the west wall and casting an alley-oop mechanic. These are baited cleaves, like Protean waves, only 4 of them this time, and you can get either double dip or reverse, though as we'll see it won't really matter. We position tight on the wall, and we bait these cleaves so that we avoid all of the fire players who will be on the middle of the east wall. Tanks and melees are on the wall, supports pointing towards middle, and DPS pointing towards the corner. Bait your first cleaves, and if you had double dip, you would dodge to this spot, obviously. That's where there's no cleaves going. However, even with reverse alley-oop, all players should still dodge towards that point. That's because if I overlay the AoEs, you can see that the reverse alley-oop cleaves would hit the tanks and melees if they didn't dodge. What this means is blue players can ignore the cast, always dodge into the middle front of the boss after your cleaves. The blue boss will now cast 6 Swell, and will spawn a wave on one of the walls, either north or south. Your blue tank might have to go help out with the Hot Impact Tank Buster, however the red tank might invuln this. Communicate beforehand. Now the blue boss will cast Deep Varial, and will aim a big conal cleave off of either the north or south wall, whichever one doesn't have the giant wave. This is also telegraphing right now either spreads or light party stacks, but it's not on the boss this time. Instead, it's on the wave the boss is going to bounce off of. If you look closely at the wave, 4 orbs means spreads on the 4 blue players, and 1 big orb means a light party stack on the blue players. Run towards the safe wall, and you're always going to spread or stack on the west side. This is done true north, you stick to your side. The cleave goes off, and a couple seconds afterwards, at the same time as some fire spreads, the spreads or light party stack will go off. In this case, spreads. Afterwards, pull the boss over towards the west side, and everybody should hang out over there, away from the fire players who are dealing with their own mechanic. The boss will cast Sickest Takeoff, and will telegraph either spreads or light party stacks. This will be on the boss itself. The boss will jump away, and since we saw spreads, we position ready for those spreads. The boss will show up and make one lane unsafe. Unfortunately, while we wanted to spread in the west side of the arena, we're going to have to slide over towards the middle. Most players here will pop knockback immunity, but the blue tank should save their knockback immunity for a little bit later. After the knockback and the cleave, slide back over towards the west side of the arena and deal with your spreads or light party stack over there. In this case, spreads. Immediately afterwards, run to the D marker. The fire players are doing some crazy stuff that means that that's going to be the one safe place from all of the fire on the ground. Immediately stack under the blue boss. There's a deep impact tank buster, and the blue tank is going to go bait this. They go far away and pop knockback immunity, or if they forgot knockback immunity, pop invuln and go take it in the fire. You'll get knocked back, but you'll have a chance of not getting knocked into the wall of death. Now let's rewind everything and go over what all of the fire debuff players are doing at this time if you happen to get fire snaking as your buff. Remember, fire debuff players are instead going to stick to the east side of the arena for all their mechanics. They're going to get targeted with Alley-oop Inferno, which are 4 baited puddle/spreads. We're going to form a nice tight box in this exact format here, as best as we can along the east wall. After these go off, don't just dodge out of them randomly, always dodge towards the front of the fire boss, and if possible, try to lean towards whichever side the blue boss is on. Because the blue boss is slightly north, we dodge slightly north. This gives you more room for error to avoid getting clipped by cleaves if they're baited slightly wrong by the blue players. A 6 Swell is being cast, and you can pay attention to it or not, but make sure you pay attention to the Hot Impact Tank Buster. Remember, the red tank might take this with invuln. Afterwards, the blue boss is casting Deep Varial, and we need to pay attention to just which side it's going towards. Since the blue boss is dashing towards north, we're going to go spread on the north, but we're going to stay on the east side of the arena, and we will always spread because fire players will always get targeted with Alley-oop Inferno. Spread tank, melee, healer range from middle. After the cleave, make sure you're not going to get clipped by the explosions from the fire puddles you dropped earlier, and stand still and wait to drop your puddles. Afterwards, rush middle, ready for Hot Aerial. The fire boss is about to jump on the furthest player from them 4 times in a row. Each hit gives a fire vuln, so each player can only get hit once or they'll die. We have tanks and healers go out first. The tanks are going to the side that roughly has no fire puddles right now, while the healers are always going to tuck themselves in the area where we just dropped our fire puddles. When the tank gets jumped on, they rush back to middle, and the melee swaps out next to them. Healer gets jumped on, and range swaps out next to them. Melee gets jumped on, range gets jumped on. Afterwards, pull the boss middle. Watch out for the wave, you'll want to pop knockback immunity here, and avoid getting clipped by the boss dashing through. All of the fire players should now position towards the east side of the boss to bait Cutback Blaze. After the explosions go off in all the fire puddles, your fire tank can go slightly further out just to guarantee that they bait this the correct direction to leave a big safe spot. You're trying to aim that safe spot towards D. If done correctly, all fire players can go now stack in the blue boss, and you're done. The bosses will cast Diver's Dare for raid-wide damage, cleansing the arena and your debuffs. After this, the bosses will even their health out again, and the blue boss will start to cast Deep Aerial. This spawns a 2-person tower in the middle of the arena, and will change the arena to a circle. Any 2 players can go in this tower. My personal recommendation is healers, so they can maximize their chance to heal, and also they can hard res if they need to, if people make mistakes, but melees aren't a bad shout either. Just don't put dragoons or warriors in the middle, as you cannot use gap closing or movement attacks while you are stuck in the tower. Send 2 players into the tower, and they're going to get stuck into this water orb. The bosses will become untargetable, and you'll see that now instead our attention is focused on the Watery Grave ad. This has a huge amount of health, and traps the 2 players inside of it, preventing them from moving, though also limiting the amount of damage they take from certain attacks. The bosses are now going to jump to either the northern intercardinals or the southern intercardinals, and the strat I'm about to show you is what's called parallel aerial. For this, always position yourself to start in between the 2 bosses. Here they started on the southern corners, so we start south. 2 players will get tethered, one with a water tether and one with a fire tether. Both of these are going to head opposite the bosses, towards the north in this case. The fire tether is going to drop theirs and position so that they are directly north or south, whatever is opposite. And the water tether is going to stick to the side nearer to the intercardinal. These tethers, we want the fire one to go through and clip the Watery Grave. We need the water one to avoid it. That's because when the fire one goes through, it actually triggers a raid-wide, but also does a huge amount of damage, 15% with each hit to the Watery Grave. If the water one was to hit it, the water tether instead gives it a vuln down, which means that it's harder to kill and more likely that you enrage to it. After this first one, if you've positioned these correctly, you've just set things up to be really easy. Everyone can now go to the B marker, regardless of where the bosses started, and hang out there. It's always going to be safe from the dashes going across the arena. When you get tethered, simply stretch them directly across, and we're going to just ping-pong the bosses up and down. There are 6 total dashes that will do raid-wide damage and 15% each to the Watery Grave if the fire tether hits it, so you'll actually only need to do 10% of the Watery Grave's health yourself. If on the last dash, the Watery Grave is below 15%, you've killed it. Eventually, you will hopefully have killed the Watery Grave. If you have not killed it by the end of the 6th dash, it will explode, killing you all. At the end, the bosses will cast Diver's Dare. And now we get the next major mechanic. Here, the water boss is casting 6 Swell and creating a wave on either the east or the west. The red boss is going to jump north and always cast Flame Floater, which will cut the arena in half with a big firewall. We want Group 1 to go west and Group 2 to go east. We're then going to get targeted with Alley-Oop Inferno, and we need to spread these and drop these puddles out. We send tanks and ranged north, healers and melees south. Drop these away. Head back to middle, and now probably the hardest part of the whole fight. We're going to get an alley-oop mechanic, but the blue boss will always jump either west or east before doing it. 4 players are about to have an easy time. The players near to the boss do this like they've done any other version of alley-oop, you're just baiting proteins. The far players have it tough. For double dip alley-oop, you want a position like this. The far range and the far healer are all the way in the corners hugging the firewall. Tanks and melees that are far are also hugging the firewall, but they should be roughly in line with the edges of the fire boss's hitbox. If done correctly, your first cleaves look like this, and since this is double dip, we have to dodge. You'll see that there is a tiny safe spot available on the far side. We're going to dodge into that safe spot, ignore the explosions for now, focus on the cleaves, and then immediately get to safety. If we have reverse alley-oop, same positions to start, but reverse alley-oop is supposed to be the one where you stay. Once again, despite that, 2 players can't stay. The tank and the melee that are far are still going to have to dodge, and they always dodge to perfectly middle east-west. Otherwise, they will get clipped by the follow-on cleaves. It's just how these AoEs come out. Afterwards, dodge the explosions. And now prepare yourself for Freaky Pie Rotation and Sickest Takeoff. Sickest Takeoff will always be light party stack, so you don't need to pay attention to that, but Freaky Pie Rotation is pairs on either all DPS or all supports. Take these all the way out to your corner where you dropped your original puddles. Give yourself lots of space. The blue boss is now going to appear in a wave, and we've all stacked middle. Unfortunately, the blue boss can make the middle lane unsafe. Pop knockback immunity, and dodge this before immediately returning back to middle to take your light party stacks. Do it on the B and the D way mark, as those should be safe from the explosions if you've done everything else correctly. At the end of this all, a Diver's Dare raid wide is going to cleanse the arena. The bosses will even their health out again before we get extreme water staking and extreme fire snaking. Like before, this is proximity baited debuffs, but instead these debuffs are big explosions waiting to happen. You cleanse the blue debuff by getting hit by a fire attack, and you cleanse the red debuff by getting hit by a water attack. It does a giant explosion in the area around you, and if you get hit by 2 explosions, you wipe. So we need to explode these 2 at a time, 1 on each side of the arena. We'll be doing this all while the bosses do insane air again. To make this work, all players have headed towards the boss matching the color of their debuff. The only players that will swap at the start are the healers, and they're in position so that the first time we get a stack or a spread, the healers are going to get hit by the opposite element and will explode opposite each other. Tanks will also have to swap, but they'll do that only when the tank buster mechanic happens. So we wait for the first attack to come out, and it so happens to be the tank buster mechanic. Healers don't need to swap back. It's fine, they're not going to do this mechanic, so they can just stay on their new side, but the tanks need to swap now. Pop cooldowns, hop in and take the tank buster, which will trigger a massive explosion around them and do extra raid-wide damage. The tanks have cleansed their debuffs now. The healers will be the next ones. So the fire players prepare to stack and the water players prepare to spread. And this will cleanse the healers of their debuff. Now that the healers have been cleansed, the melee should swap groups. This will cleanse the melees. And finally, the range swap over for the last one. If you do not cleanse your debuff, you will explode roughly the exact same time as the final bit of insane air goes off, likely killing any of the players near to you. Afterwards, drag the bosses together for a Diver's Dare raid wide, which will cleanse the arena again. All that's left is the alley-oop combo. There's a double dip or reverse alley-oop, and you're going to take this all the way out at your clock spot. If it was reverse alley-oop, we would just stay put out here, but because it's double dip alley-oop, we're going to dodge, and we're going to dodge clockwise. The reason we all have to dodge the same way is because we're also getting alley-oop Inferno. This will go off at the exact same time as the second cleaves of the alley-oop from the water boss. Clock spots for the first one, and then we dodge clockwise in this case. The fire puddles drop down, and we immediately need to move in as they're going to explode because they also got hit by water. Afterwards, stack on the blue boss, other than one tank, preferably main tank, runs out, and baits the deep impact tank buster while everyone else is stacked for pie rotation. Pop knockback immunity if you're this tank, or position so you don't get knocked into the wall. The party is going to rotate around the fire boss for their 3 hits of the stack, and main tank can join them as soon as they can. After 3 hits, you get a Diver's Dare raid wide, which will cleanse the arena. And now all that's left. One more Diver's Dare, and the bosses will cast Over the Falls. Kill them before this finishes, or it's game over. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed.